Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel Tour update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest on the developments here in Israel throughout the region and beyond, with chief focus on the latest tensions on the one hand between the Islamic Republic of Iran, its various proxies throughout the region, versus Israel, and on the other hand, on ongoing negotiations to reach some sort of a hostage release deal in exchange for a temporary cessation of hostilities initially, alongside a long list of other Israeli concessions, it's always important to remember how the war began. 321 days ago, on October 7th of 2023, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 109 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th of last year, Iran practically joined the war by greenlighting its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, to date, thousands of rockets have been fired by this terror group, alongside additional Iranian proxies from Yemen, Iraq, Syria, including from Iran proper, on the night between the 13th and 14th of April of earlier this year. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, it's good to see you. What can you update us with on the latest?
So, as we know, Jonathan, the major diplomatic move this week has been Secretary of State Blinken's visit to the area. Blinken did not succeed in getting his so-called bridging proposal to be accepted by all parties. He has left the area, went back to Washington, but at least managed to avoid a conflagration into a regional war during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, which was one of his minor objectives, at least. And, you know, if one tries to find a metaphor for the Blinken mission, it can be the J-lots, that artificial pier which was driven to the area in great cost and great effort, and then pushed into Gaza, fell apart, was fixed again, succumbed to the storms, and then had to be taken back. So up to now, the diplomacy trying to bridge Israel and Hamas had basically the same lot as the J-lots. Now, in the various fronts, fighting goes on, both in the Lebanese border area and even beyond, in Judea and Samaria, more and more with drones being operated by the IDF, and in Gaza. Earlier today, the IDF has announced that several of the 6 bodies of the hostages killed in Gaza and recovered by Israeli troops had bullet holes in them, which means that they were killed by their captors when they probably sensed that a rescue operation is about to take place. This was not this week. It was probably back in March. And that shows the entire Israeli community, military as well as civilian, that there is a lot of danger to the hostages' lives. They are not kept in any stable conditions, just waiting for the negotiations to succeed. They are in imminent danger of death, as well as deprivation every minute.
With all the pain and anguish that has to do, of course, with the hostages who remain in Hamas captivity for this long, any hostage who is recovered alive is a gift. The majority of us thought that the moment they were taken, that the majority of those hostages were dead from the onset, and therefore any effort that needs to be undertaken in order to return them, hopefully alive, but in any condition, needs to be undertaken with full force, and also several concessions need to be taken into account in order to make that possible, since these are not soldiers who were on the front line guarding the border. The majority of them are civilians who were taken during a early Saturday morning celebrating a Jewish holiday here in Israel, something that also needs to be taken into the equation. And the government here in Israel, as well as the defense establishment, are on one mind in this aspect. Of course, the level of leniency is a different story, but let's now turn to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to focus my question for you on the northern front. Obviously, 50 projectiles overnight or last night were launched towards the Golan town or community of Katzrin, something that indicates a upbeat in cross-border hostilities against civilian communities, since there are no military bases in this vicinity, and the IDF has already said that this is an escalation, a significant escalation in the blatant activities by this Iranian proxy towards Israel.
Indeed, Jonathan, but as I always I would like to refer to something that was said by Amir with regards to the jailhods. I would take this example, and I would say that the United States they still found a way to send some humanitarian aid through Ashdod port. So if a door is being closed, then sometimes there is a window that you could open, and I hope that let's try and be optimistic that this deal would be carried out, and we would see our hostages back in Israel. Going to the north of Israel, you're right. We saw more than 200 projectiles that were shot toward Israel in the last 3 days. And of course, the significant attack, I would say, yesterday that we saw toward Katsirin, which is the largest city in the Golan Heights. We didn't have some severe injuries, luckily so, and mainly because there were interceptions of the Iron Dome over the skies of Katsirin, and because the people did exactly what they are supposed to do, which it means that once they hear an alert, they go to their shelters. But we saw some projectiles that did penetrate the defense, fell into the city and made some damages. And so we're happy that it is not costing life, but this is unbearable, of course, that Israel would be shot toward its civilian cities. We know that there was this acquisition that was kept in the north, and now we see that the Hezbollah is pushing the boundaries. From the Israeli point of view, of course, we have to remember that when we are talking about the north, we have to think about the strategic posture of Israel. And the decision of Israel starting from the 7th of October was that Israel is in the attack in the south part of Israel, in the Gaza Strip, against the Hamas, and on the defense. We call it an active defense because still there are some activities over the border, but basically in a defense posture in the northern part of Israel. And when you are in the defense, sometimes, unfortunately, we could see that there are some hits. We always talk about it. The defense can never be hermetic. And, we could we could give an example from the sports world that in soccer, if you have the goalie, it could be the best goalie in the world, but if someone would continuously shoot balls toward his goal, some of them would be getting in. And if you really want to win the game, you have to be also active in some other areas, like in the attack and so on. So looking into the north, we hope that there would be some agreement on a diplomatic way. But of course, the IDF is ready for any other options if this won't be, I would say, the result of the efforts made by the United States, France, and others.
Indeed. Well, just for the sake of some of our viewers are American, others British, others European. So soccer, football, we won't go into what's the right word, but rather I may lean to the latter, but that's a different story. But let's turn to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Zineb Laboua, who is a senior or a research fellow and the program manager at the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute. It's great to see you, Zineb. I'd like
Thank
to.
you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure indeed, and we're looking forward to having you more often on. So we're looking forward to that. But nonetheless, I'd like to focus on the Washington's precipice towards currently the state of play. We heard the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant just yesterday, while visiting the Philadelphia corridor, that the state of Israel and the defense establishment at large is looking to round up the missions that it's set for the current war in Gaza versus Hamas, the return of the hostages, and so on, and to redirect the attention northward towards Lebanon and potentially even beyond that. So the question here is, to what degree does Israel have a mandate to pursue such an objective within Washington, particularly at the time when we're still during an election season where the attention span is obviously not eager to divert elsewhere?
Yes, so as you said, it's an election period, and for President Biden, it's crucial for him as well as for his team to present to his constituency as well as voters and so on a ceasefire deal. This is the goal for them. They do not want Netanyahu as well as his team to continue the war in Gaza. I think this has been clear since the start, and this is how I think Washington has been approaching the issue. It's even more important in the sense that, for example, when the assassination of Haniyeh happened in Iran, one of the first things that the Biden administration tried to signal is we do not want a regional war. So this is how I think the Biden administration has been approaching it. For them, the Gaza war is bad is bad not just for their PR but also for their for an agenda that they're trying to present. I think this is especially problematic for Israel because it is an existential threat for them to have Hamas still operating in Gaza. It's even more important to emphasize that even if Haniyeh was killed in Tehran, Sinwar is still operating. And yesterday he issued a statement saying that he would like to stay alive and would like for that to be part of the agreement of any ceasefire deal. So for Israel, it needs to push a little bit on its own to secure its own interests. And I think this is what Netanyahu, as well as his national security team, have understood since the start.
Indeed. Mr. Owen, Sinwar is hoping to gain a lifeline, something that, of course, anyone within any defense establishment, either in the West or in the region, knows that that's a delusional request. Nevertheless, how viable is such a demand?
Well, you quoted from Gallant's remarks yesterday at the Rafah front, and one of the points he made was that the Rafah brigade of Hamas has been defeated by the IDF. Now, the Rafah brigade had 4 battalions, and while Gallant did not specifically say that all 4 of them have been defeated, he stayed at the brigade level. The implication was that the IDF can see the Rafah operation as over successfully, also including the Philadelphia operation, where he said that most of the tunnels are not really excavations, the way we saw so many other underground passages, but merely some improvised works where some ground was used to cover hastily prepared overground excavations. What that meant, along with the question you posed regarding moving the center of gravity to the north, is not that Israel wants to fold the Gaza campaign in order to launch a bigger Lebanon campaign, but rather to have ceasefires all around Israel in order to better prepare to recover, recuperate, and regain composure and prepare for the eventuality of a bigger war with Hezbollah. Israel has been at war for almost 11 months now. The reserve forces feel the exhaustion. More soldiers are needed. Some 15,000 former reserve troops who were discharged because they were not necessary a few years ago are being recalled for retraining and redeployment. So it is best for Israel to have some rest and recreation now before it goes on to the next phase.
Indeed. Of course, the various considerations are fluid and dynamic because they need to also take into the equation the enemy itself. But I'd like to turn to General Gavish and ask you particularly, today the European Union task force in the Red Sea announced that a French vessel rescued some 29 sailors from a commercial oil tanker which was targeted by the Houthis in Yemen, namely Ansar Allah. What can be done in order to frustrate those activities other than the offensive activities that are being undertaken? Is it an issue of mandate, or is this an issue of not dealing efficiently with the enemy, despite the power disparity that exists between the European and American task forces currently operational on that front and the tribal forces loyal to the Houthis?
Well, Jonathan, I think that everything starts and begins in Iran. We have to remember it all. The Houthis, the Hezbollah, those in Syria, in Iraq, all over. And now we see that they are trying also to penetrate the West Bank. But we all know that everything starts in Iran. So I think that in order really to deal with the issue, Houthi is one of them, is to deal with Iran. And there are all kinds of ways, of course, to deal with Iran. It is not only everything by force. There are economical sanctions, and other means that could be applied by the Western world, led by the United States. So I think that the real answer to your question from a strategic point of view is we have to look on this threat coming from Iran, because the Houthis are doing what Iran is asking them basically to do, and they are serving the interests of Iran. So I think this is really the answer to your question. And of course, there are some military means. This is what we saw in happening in the Houthis. But we have to say that unfortunately, although there were some attacks by the coalition in Yemen, and of course on the defense, we saw the coalition being very effective. Unfortunately, the Houthis are not being deterred yet, and we see them continuously trying, to influence the region and basically to influence the economic, the world economy. Look what is happening in Egypt. No one is anymore sailing toward the Suez Tunnel. Of course, it affects Europe. It affects everyone all around the Mediterranean. So this is, of course, a huge issue that must be taken care of by the international community.
Of course, in light of the backlog, the fact that there is no backlog due to the overcreation of commercial vessels during the Corona period, which ultimately brought about or transpired a capacity to continue transfer of goods through the Cape of Hope and rendering basically the Suez Canal, including the addition that was dug in concert with the main artery of that canal that has brought Egypt into large amounts of expenditure, which it expected at least to pay for during this period of time. And now it's facing even more hardship in paying back its various costs. The European Union has, of course, delivered more than 7 billion euros to Egypt for various projects, basically bailout money to try and help it survive this tough period of time. But Rabo, I'd like to ask you specifically, when we're looking at the broad scheme of things, we see Washington now greenlighting sales of offensive weaponry once again to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We're seeing the various actors in the region bracing themselves for prospects of a multi-sector confrontation with the Islamic Republic of Iran and its various tentacles throughout the region. What is the current state of play of the Abraham Accords that was so instrumental in confronting the Iranian threat, also when it launched its belligerent activities on the night between the 13th and 14th of April, namely the direct confrontation with Israel and the architecture that we saw under the leadership of Central Command?
I would say that the Abraham Accords are basically now on pause. Israel is expanding its relationship with the Abraham Accords countries on its own. There isn't much progress because the Abraham Accords were not just a recognition of Israel as a military power in the Middle East that is capable of helping its allies, Arab Sunni countries, against Iranian activities, but it was also a recognition that Israel is actually a positive influence on these countries. For example, when it comes to food security, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, etc. These are things that Israel can give to these countries and can collaborate and cooperate more. However, as you know, with the Biden administration, the idea that we can have regional integration with Iran, as long as Iran does not work on nuclear weapons, as long as Iran collaborates on certain things, it's possible to integrate Iran into the region. It basically changed the whole dynamic. For example, Israel was looking into normalizing with Chad. It was looking into normalizing with Mauritania. It was looking into normalizing with Sudan, which actually normalized its relationship with Iran instead. It's the same thing with Saudi Arabia. They saw that the Houthis were taken off the terrorist list. The first thing they did was, okay, it looks like Washington is not going to protect us. We need to find a way to manage our relationship with Iran since that's where they get most of their that's where the Houthis get most of their support when it comes to training and weapons, and so you can see how everything goes back as participants said to Iran, and this completely, I think, changed the Middle East, where Iran is operating as really a malign actor, and the Biden administration thinks that as long as they signal that they are willing to protect their U.S. partners, Iran will stay at bay. And of course, it did not happen. In fact, it emboldened them more. It's something that I think because of the nature of Iran as an Islamic republic with a revolutionary doctrine, they seek more penetration of areas that they see capable of changing. It's really a doctrine of protracted conflict. And I think this is very important to emphasize how the Abraham Accords a few years ago had really a bright future, but now you can see how a lot of things needs to change for it to prosper more.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, the last minute is yours. Go ahead.
Here in the region, of course, especially in Israel, we are Israel-centric, and we believe rightly so. We are very impatient to solve our problems right here and now. But because the major decisions, either for pro-action or for passivity, are taken in Washington, we see that one of the major bones of contention is whether new wars are to be started before the election. And obviously, the two parties competing don't want to appear doing that because domestic politics has center stage. And only the other day, J.D. Vance, the candidate for vice president on the Republican ticket, boasted that under President Trump, no new wars were started during his first term, and in his second term too, he will only concentrate on protecting the homeland's borders. So obviously the Democratic administration too would rather wait for November.
With that being said, J.D. Vance also mentioned the resolute support for the state of Israel and emphasized Washington's continued support if indeed Trump and he would assume the role of presidency and vice presidency in the White House towards the Jewish state and, of course, in broader aspects as well. So both parties do have some sort of a PR campaign in support of Israel, while the other sectors are also within the equation. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today's update, so I'd like immediately also to say thank you to Zineb Rabea, to General Doron Gavish, and Mr. Amir Oren, of course, for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. The Middle East, home to the cradle of civilization, retains a reputation from time immemorial as one of the most complex, conflict-ridden regions of the world. A cluster of nations, religions, powers, and influences, Mideast intricacies pose conundrums to even the most astute individuals. Bombarded daily, indeed every minute, by a barrage of information, some accurate, yet most of it less so, TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio every Tuesdays and Fridays for content that truly matters.